Hello and welcome back. All right, we've made it through our grayscale version of our city. We've talked a little bit about sort of the basics of how we're going to do all of our work with photorealism. Namely, we're going to take photo textures, we're going to process them, we're going to apply them to the shapes in our scene, apply proper blending properties to them for your layer blending, and then also finally go back in and paint everything up so that it looks really nice. So obviously when we're doing simple geometry, that's one thing, but if you have to paint an entire scene, that is something else entirely. So what sort of approach would you use to paint something like this? So first of all, my recommendation is use your framework here that you've constructed, whether you've used 3D or whether you've used 2D in Photoshop, but use your construction as a general guideline, and don't worry about making sure that you find the exact windows that need to go over here, right? Like there are lots of things that you can do and lots of little changes that you'll probably need to make along the way. But remember to keep your scene basically intact. Make sure that all of your line work is in or at least readable. Again, if you have a 3D piece, you're going to want to do a nice render of that 3D and then bring it here into Photoshop. Before you begin texturing, it's important to first decide what textures you need. You know, when I look at this scene here, there's actually going to be quite a few things that I'm going to need to take care of. So I'm going to need materials for these trees. I'm going to need materials for my roads, probably for the bricks in my building, for my storefronts, for my windows. Eventually, I'm probably going to need things like street lights or possibly something for this ad over here, maybe some branding for these windows. But right now, I'm not going to worry about all of that branding. Oh, and I'm definitely going to need something to replace these strokes in the background to make it actually look like a city. But I'm not going to worry about all of the details at once. I'm just going to first worry about what are the main photo textures I need, and what are the sorts of things that I can grab off of a site like textures.com, or if you have a favorite texture site, you can use that too. And I want to make sure that I get those main broad strokes in first, and then we can worry about the details like billboards and branding and stuff later, right? So in this particular case, if I go over to my Forge artboard here, I have a whole bunch of photos, and I've already gone ahead and organized them. And so let's just break them down really quickly. One thing that I have are windows. I have a bunch of different types of windows. So these are all from textures.com. And I didn't get any of the large sizes. If you've got a free account, you only get 15 credits a day. So I'm going to try and keep my scene to not more than 15 photos, which is probably ideal anyway because it'll help me manage my scene a little bit better. All right, so we've got a lot of different pieces here. They're all, you can see, at different sizes. Some of them are not going to work, at least some of these borders are on these photos or on these elements are not going to work, but we'll worry about that later. I've also got different shop fronts. I picked out 3, sort of a simple one there, kind of a nicer shop, and then this third one here. I grabbed a couple of different trees, and these will eventually be replacing these guys here. I grabbed a cityscape for the background. This doesn't need to be huge, even though it is going to go back here. What we'll do eventually is we'll just size this up and blur it out so that all of the foreground stuff will stand out against sort of the blurrier background. I've got a road here. It doesn't, again, have to be absolutely perfect. It really just, remember, these are going to be very stretched and skewed to go along these angled side streets here. So I'm not too worried about the quality of the road here. And then I've got a series of different brick photographs to use here. And I can use these bricks for my piece. Okay, so with all of these photos, I should be able to get right to work. But remember, when you're doing one of these scenes, when you're doing photorealism, it's actually really just, it's not one big project. It's, if you want to call it one big project, the project is one big folder with a bunch of little projects in it. So the first of our projects that we're going to need to do is we're going to need to process all of our photography and get it ready to go. Now, I've already got some processed photos, so I can sort of show you what I've done to get things looking about right. So if I look at these processed bricks, what we have here, if I zoom in, is I have these bricks here, and I've made kind of just a sheet of them. I also have these bricks here, and I've kind of made a sheet of them. And then I've got this brickwork here, and I've made a sheet of bricks. Now, later on, I can add things like graffiti or ads or paint or whatever I want. But I want to start with basically just three major brick types. I've just kind of got like an old building brick like you would see in some of these older constructions here. I've got some painted brick, and then I've got some sort of patchy looking brick. Some patchy looking brick with this interesting facade that looks like it could go on a corner here. So what am I going to do to process these? Well, one thing that you probably saw is that all of these bricks were processed so that they're grayscale. The reason that, again, that we process things so that they're grayscale is we can add in color later. All photographs are probably going to be taken under different lighting. They're going to appear differently. We may not necessarily want the colors that are being used, and it's easier to just repaint something that's grayscale than paint something that's color. So generally what I do is I would go, first of all, make sure that your photos are rasterized. They'll be imported as smart objects. So you're going to right click, you're going to rasterize that layer. You'll go to Image, Adjustment, Desaturate. Image, Adjustment, Desaturate. And then you're just going to left click, Shift, Alt, drag, and you just drag in these new layers. And then you do Control E to sort of flatten them, and you can drag them in any direction here and make a nice big sheet of bricks. So that's what we would do for this guy, right? And if we wanted to do this one, one thing that you'll notice is that these bricks are quite a bit smaller and these are quite a bit larger. One thing that's really helpful before you start to put your imagery in your piece is to try and sort of even out the sizes of things a little bit. That way when you're putting bricks in, you're basically starting at a baseline, right? So let's go ahead and I've sized those down just a little bit. Let's rasterize this layer. Let's grab this part on brick 3 here. Select Inverse Delete. Get this last bit off the front here. All right. And these I'm going to size up a little bit. Again, everything's sort of going to get remixed by the time we get to putting these in the piece, but I generally want to make sure that these bricks are roughly the same size. So edit, image, adjustments, desaturate for this brick here. Right, and if I am interested in doing so, I can take this and turn this into a sheet using the same process, just that click, shift, alt, drag process. Right. It's okay if there's a little bit of this repetition. We're not too worried about that right now. Okay, same thing here, and that's what I would do with this brick. All right, let's move on to another thing that we're going to need to process. We're going to need to process things like our shops. So let's look at that for just a moment. Okay. This one is pretty much ready to go. I mean, all I would need to do is rasterize, do an image adjustment, desaturate. The important thing is you're processing the big chunks like this, these big assets. It's okay if you size them up a little bit. It's probably okay. It's okay if you size them down a little bit. What's important though is that what you end up with is larger than what's going to be going on here. We don't want to lose too much detail as we move over there. All right. So we've got this guy that's probably good enough. Then we've got this nice shop. So let's rasterize this. And what we'll do is just put those little marquee boxes around here. And we'll just shave off some of these edges. Now, there are certain problems that we're going to have with this one. We've got branding all over the place. We've got stuff indoors, some stuff off to the side here. So what we're going to do, first we're going to go to desaturate. We're going to desaturate the image. We're going to do a marquee tool, make sure that we're on the layer. And we'll just do a little box like that. Do Control T, and then Shift drag, or just drag in any direction. And what that will do is it will sort of just stretch the pixels here across that. Then we can do the same thing with this door, or this window rather. And then for the rest of this stuff, maybe we could do the same thing here. This is going to be fine for now. I mean, we're not going to worry about it too much. The important thing is just that this stuff is covered up. We can always paint over this stuff later. But this is an important part of processing. We want to make sure that we get rid of any branding. All we really want is some of this nice building architecture here. We'll go to a layer above this, and we'll just drop in some black on the windows, and we could probably live at that. If we feel particularly inclined, we could go ahead and paint some simple detail in here, just so that we know these are windows, and we might have to address stuff later. And this is a good example, just this little tiny piece of how photorealism is going to work within a painting. Right, we're going to have photo elements, and then we're just going to paint over certain of those elements that we would like to address. Okay, so I would do that with all of my shops, cut them out, and get them ready to go. And then let's just, as one other example, let's look at our windows. And we'll stop there with our photo processing, and we'll in our next video we'll talk a little bit about where we're putting these and how we're placing them, because that's sort of worthy of its own video. All right, again, we're rasterizing the layers, and we're just cutting these out. Select inverse, delete, and we want to make sure this is desaturated. Like other things, just like the brick stuff that we talked about earlier. We kind of want to make sure that our windows are roughly about the same size. Rasterize layer, select, inverse, delete. For these windows, this brickwork is important too, so I'm going to go ahead and select that. That's this guy here. Rasterize the layer, select, inverse, delete. You know, for more involved windows, I'm not going to worry about the brickwork since we already have bricks, but what I will do is I will grab my polygonal lasso tool and I'll just click along the window here. Yeah. And all I really want are the window and the trim. Oops. Make sure you rasterize your layers. Right. So I would do this with all of my windows. I would cut them out. For a piece like this, I mean, you could have potentially up to 4 different windows, depending on if you really want to have 4 distinct windows. I would maybe cut out 1 or 2 and just leave it at that. Once your windows are all cut though, one thing that you would want to do is figure out how you're going to use them, right? Do I want to use these windows as windows, or do I want to use them as like shop windows? One of the nice things about this particular shape is that you could, you know, squeeze them in or make them taller or chunkier like this. So you can use these elements in different ways, depending on what you like. Don't feel limited just because you have a photo that it has to be used exactly as it was in the source. It doesn't need to be. Okay. So one thing that I usually do is I'll try and size these windows generally, just like I did with the bricks, to make sure that I'm kind of starting from the same, roughly the same size. Right. All right, and so I would do that with all the photo references that I have. I'll get them all set and ready to go, and then in the next video here, we'll start to apply them to our scene and start getting things aligned and looking a little bit more photoreal. So we'll stop there for right now and we'll pick it up then.